All right. Well, good official morning, everyone. I think we're gonna go get started since we do have a good group of us joining the call. Happy Friday again. Thank you so much for spending Friday morning with us. My name is Anna Gukasian, and I'm the Senior Research Associate here at LA Best Babies Network. I coordinate the LA County Home Visiting Consortium along with my wonderful team who's here to support today. Thank you so much for joining us for immigration updates and legal considerations training. Today we'll be talking about how we can support our clients with this new administration. Again, this training will provide important updates on immigration policies under the new administration and guidance on how home visiting staff can support families. We will share resources and highlight the legal ways that home visiting staff can support families during these tumultuous times. The consortium is partnered with Neighborhood Legal Services of LA County for the second time. As some of you may recall, we have previously worked with them on a three-part series back in December. All those trainings have been recorded and are uploaded on our website. I will link them down shortly once I introduce our amazing speaker, but this training will also be recorded as well and uploaded on our website again. For today, our learning objectives will be to get an overview of some of the most important immigration updates since the new administration took office. We'll get an overview of our Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, why they exist and how they protect us. We will identify valid search warrants versus when consent is required to enter a house. Then we'll highlight support that home visiting staff can provide to clients in an ICE encounter. We'll also understand the possible outcomes if someone is arrested by immigration. We'll then identify family preparedness planning resources to support clients with dependent care and legal defense. And then we'll conclude the training by sharing NLSLA resources such as Know Your Rights informational videos, family preparedness planning guide, removal defense attorney list, and a list of mental health resources for adults and children. Just a few housekeeping tasks before we get started. As I mentioned in the beginning of the call, this webinar is being recorded and we will upload it on our website after the training is complete. We will be sharing the slides and all the materials shared in a follow-up email to all those who registered and all those who are in attendance this morning. And then if you do have any questions for the speaker, please use the Q&A feature on this Zoom webinar. We'll try to answer as many questions as we go. And then lastly, once the webinar comes to a close, we did prepare a short survey for you to provide us with feedback after this training is done. It only takes 5 minutes. My team and I look through all the responses, and the feedback really helps us understand what trainings and events we can offer that would benefit you all in the future. Well, with that being said, I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker who's joining us is Alyssa Dobbins-Feck. A little bit about Alyssa. She's been working as an immigration attorney since 2007, focusing on humanitarian remedies, including relief under the Violence Against Women Act and the U visa for crime survivors. She worked in supervising and management positions at the Central American Resource Center, Immigration Center for Women and Children, and she's now at Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County. In this time, she has submitted and supervised the work of advocates on thousands of applications, including U visa, DACA, naturalization, family petitions, temporary protected status, and asylum for others. She currently supervises the immigration team at Neighborhood Legal Services of LA County. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I will pass it over to you to get our training started.
Great, happy to be here. And in the years that I've worked with so many of your agencies, and I so appreciate what you do. And it's so nice to know that there's so many people out there who care about our communities and our clients. And so I'm happy to meet with you and pass on some information, and hopefully it's helpful. So what we're going to do today is go through some brief immigration updates. That in itself could be a 2-hour training. And so I'm not going to spend, the whole time on that. So we'll pick and choose what is most applicable to our communities. We're going to review constitutional rights and how they apply in the immigration context. as well as how those rights maybe affect, your visits with clients, if you are, in a encounter with ICE. We'll talk about some family preparedness planning and share resources. And it's important to note that the information that I provide today is legal information, not legal advice. I will share some resources for obtaining legal consultations, and that is the best place to refer any client who has questions about their particular case. Okay, so moving on. There is a lot here. I'm trying to focus, on what is affecting my life the most, working with the clients that we have in Los Angeles. So a lot of what we're seeing, and it's not everything, but a lot of what we're seeing is increased immigration enforcement focusing on people who have removal orders. And we'll talk about who might have a removal order, but basically the court system, the immigration courts are very backed up. And the Trump administration wants to get high numbers of deportees. And so in putting more people into the court system, they are, backing that system up even more at the same time as they're firing immigration judges. So they want to deport the people who are easiest for them to do that. And that is people who've already had a case in an immigration court and either lost it or received a removal order through it, because they can be picked up and that order can be reinstated very quickly. So they're really focusing on people who already have removal orders. We're seeing an expansion also of expedited removal for the same purpose. Expedited removal is a quick deportation without much of a legal process. And so it used to be used just for people who were entering, that they caught entering without legal status. And now it's being used for anyone who can't show that they have been present in the US for more than 2 years if they did not enter legally. So that is, that expansion covers a lot more people than it used to. They have rescinded the protected areas guidance for ICE enforcement. So previously, under the Obama and Biden administrations, ICE agents were prohibited from going into sensitive locations like schools and shelters, clinics, courtrooms. And in this administration and in the first Trump administration, that guidance gets rescinded. So they're allowed to follow whoever they're, looking for into any situation, regardless of the chilling effect that that might have on the other people who are in that area. So that is that's a big difference. This is being litigated. This is a situation where there is a lawsuit afoot. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but hopefully there might be some updates there in the coming months. Removal proceedings for people who are denied immigration benefits. And this was no surprise to us because this happened in the first Trump administration, but in previous administrations, when affirmative applications for relief, like a family petition or a VAWA or a U visa, were denied, they would just deny that case and not necessarily place the person into removal proceedings. And now people are being placed directly into removal proceedings when their application gets denied. So that's a return to the previous policy of the previous Trump administration. There have been, there's an executive order that with the purpose of intimidating immigrants from using public benefits and threatening to share information between agencies about people who might unauthorizedly be receiving public benefits. But there's no indication that there's any widespread fraud with regards to public benefits because most undocumented immigrants are not entitled to the benefits that this order covers. So the idea I think is more like to have a chilling effect than to actually change anything because the law and the statute, or sorry, and the regulations that implement the law have not changed. And I know that you all had a training from Lena Silver, who is an amazing public benefits attorney from NLS last year, and nothing has changed since she talked to you. The public charge rule is still exactly the same as it ever was. And for the most part, if people are subject to public charge, they are not eligible for the benefits that would make them a public charge anyway. So as of now, nothing has really changed in that regard, but for the chilling effect, right? Because I think someone might have mentioned in their questions for the presentation, they were saying people are afraid to receive benefits, and that's exactly the point of those orders. Another thing that we are seeing is more collection of social media information and family information from people who are applying for affirmative applications, but also for entry into the country. So like the use of, moderate, looking through cell phones, looking through contacts, we're seeing much more of that. And then, there's been more information sharing and talk of expanding information sharing between federal agencies. So between like the IRS or USPS and ICE. With the IRS, I think probably most of you have heard on the news that ICE wants information about people who are using ITIN numbers versus Social Security numbers to try to get those addresses. So, this is something that, someone who's working on an ITIN right now can't really change, like that information is in there. But it is certainly of note, especially for people who have not requested an ITIN, to know that this information is likely going to be shared with ICE at this point. And lastly, the registration requirement, which has been taking up a bunch of my headspace recently. So the idea that someone who entered without status and has not applied for certain benefits needs to register with immigration, provide their biometric data, and to be clear, this is an enforcement tool. The registration application is not an application for benefits. And there are some serious, we'll talk about Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. There are some serious Fifth Amendment implications in the registering, because in doing so, people are admitting to a crime that actually has larger penalties than the penalty for failure to register. So if you have clients who have questions about whether they should register, the best idea is to have them talk to an immigration attorney or an accredited representative, because that person can go through their particular case and the pros and cons, and then every person needs to make their own decision of what they want to do in the face of this registration requirement. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I don't see any questions yet, but you can feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box, and I may see them and answer them at the moment if they have to do with the slide, and otherwise I can do it at the end. Okay, so I wanted to move on to a poll just to see from the very beginning what you already know and what you would do in this situation. We're going to do this poll again at the end and see if anything changes. I think, okay, here we go. So the poll question is, you are visiting a client in their home, you hear banging on the door and find that ICE agents are outside. Which of the following things would you do? And pick multiple options. There are multiple right answers here, but please pick all of the options that you think you might do in this situation. So the options are: tell your client to open the door, tell your client not to open the door yourself and ask what they want, shout through the closed door and ask why they're there, tell your client to cooperate with the agents, tell the client that they have the right to remain silent, ask if the agents have a warrant to enter the house, use your cell phone to start video recording, or hide under the table. So those are your options. And I will wait to hear when the poll closes. I'm
Got a
very
lot of
interested.
responses still coming in, so we'll let it open a little bit longer.
Sounds good.
Leave the poll up for about 15 more seconds if anybody else has any last minute responses. Okay, I will end it now. Thank you all for participating. Really great here. You should see the results as soon as I click. Okay. Are you able to see the results here?
Okay, I can. So lots of people would say tell their client not to open the door. Lots of people would tell their client they have the right to remain silent. Lots of people would ask if if the agents have a warrant. And about half of the respondents would use their cell phone to start video recording, and only one person would hide under the table. All right, we're starting from a really strong place. Actually, I'm going to take a photo of that because I want to remember what that was initially. Okay. So great start. We are off to a auspicious beginning, and we will move on. Okay, so now we're going to go through the presentation and try that at the end and see what it looks like. Okay, so we're going to go through Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. And it's really important to know that your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights are guaranteed by the Constitution, regardless of immigration status. And the idea is that, you know, the framers of the Constitution were trying to protect against government overreach, and they wanted this to apply to everybody to keep the government from intruding unnecessarily into people's lives, because they were coming from a situation where the government was intruding a lot into people's lives. So the Fourth Amendment guarantees freedom from unreasonable search and seizure, and the Fifth Amendment guarantees the freedom from self-incrimination, which is where we get the right to remain silent. And so what it means to have these rights is that there is a burden placed on the government before they intrude in our lives, before they arrest us, before they enter in our house. They need to have probable cause to believe that we've violated the law. And in the immigration context, they need probable cause to believe that we have violated immigration laws before they can stop and arrest us. So it's important to note that probable cause is not allowed to be based on race, language spoken, or someone's physical appearance. And, you know, as we all know, citizens can be of any race, can speak any language, can dress in any way. So none of that is legitimately linked to, you know, probable cause that someone's violating immigration laws. So how do immigration officers gain probable cause? They gain it in a, you know, in a sort of random search environment, or like a random street sweep. Street sweep. They gain probable cause just asking questions, and then people don't know that they have Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. They don't know that they can remain silent. They don't know that they can refuse a search. And they just tell the immigration agents where they were born. They say where, you know, when they entered, they show their foreign identification, or they consent to a search and foreign identification is found on their person. And they often just tell the agent that they have no legal status. And at that point, then the agent has all of the probable cause that they need to arrest the person that they were talking to. So that is a very common scenario. And then, like I mentioned, it can also be probable cause can also be gained through a search. So if someone consents to a search, and let's say, you know, a foreign passport or a matricula or some other foreign consular document is, you know, found on their person with no other indication of legal status, like a work permit or residency card, that can form the probable cause that the person is violating immigration laws. Also false documents, because immigration officers are trained to spot false documents. So if they see that in someone's, you know, in their wallet, then that's a pretty good indication that the person is in violation of immigration law. That rises to the level of probable cause. And then as a side note, there are some documents that people can carry without giving rise to probable cause, even if they are searched. And that would include a valid state-issued driver's license or identification. Also copies of a valid work permit or permanent resident card. And the reason we say copies is just because technically you are supposed to travel with the original, but they are quite expensive and they're incredibly time intensive to replace because the wait period for a new work permit or green card can be up to a year. So a lot of people like to travel with a copy to not risk losing the original. And another thing that does not give rise to probable cause would be evidence that someone had resided in the US for over 2 years. And some folks are doing this, and some orgs are recommending that people do this because of that expanded expedited removal, the burden is placed on the person who is picked up to show that they have been present for 2 years in order to show that they're entitled to removal proceedings versus that expedited fast removal process. So that is something that should not give rise to probable cause because it's just evidence that the person lives here. It would be like pay stubs or bills or something like that that would not lead to a finding that the person is in violation of immigration law. Okay, next slide. Another thing that gives rise to probable cause is running from immigration agents. So if someone is stopped and they are going to maintain their Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, they can just say that to the officer. I do not, I am maintaining my right to remain silent. I do not consent to a search. And then, asking if they are free to leave. And that is a much better way to end that interaction than running from immigration agents. I see a question here. I've seen videos of people who state they'll remain silent as that is their right, and they are told by the agents they'll be taken to jail for obstruction. What is the best answer? We'll get to this in a minute, but there is, there's a lot of coercion that happens in those moments because the agent really needs the person to work with them, right? Like they really want that information. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but at the end of the day, if someone is arrested in violation of their rights, there's something you could do about that later in a legal process. So, it still could be worth the while to do that, if someone wants to maintain, a possibility for a defense later on. Okay, and then there's a real ID question with the federal limits apply on the AB60 license. And so does carrying the AB60, like not the real ID license, does that lead to probable cause? It's not supposed to. So that's all I can say about that. It's not supposed to be an indication. Okay, so our Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights mean that we are not required to immediately respond to questions, particularly questions about origin or entry from immigration officials. We're not required to consent to a search or show documents or sign anything. And everybody has the right to speak with an attorney before they do those things. And I think that, the question earlier was, like, do you, if the agents tell you they're gonna, arrest you for obstruction, one possible response is, I want to speak to an attorney. I have a right to an attorney. And obviously the attorney isn't present in that moment. So I think, it's like documenting, like, you are not obstructing them, you are protecting your rights, and you have this right to speak with an attorney before you do any of this. So it's just like, it's like asking to slow down the process, right? Because you are forfeiting rights when you volunteer this information. And so you do have a right to speak with someone before you do that. And what the officers do after that is a wild card. As we'll see, and I think, as sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But as long as the person is, decides they're going to maintain their rights, then there's something to work with later. And our right to freedom from government intrusion is even stronger when we're in our homes and also in a business. So the same rules apply to searches within a home or business at work. So no one has to allow immigration officials, but also police, anyone into their house or into a private area of business without a valid search warrant. And so basically what happens is agents either need a valid search warrant or the consent of the person letting them in to enter. And so they almost never have a valid search warrant. They are almost always asking for consent, but they're not asking in a way that makes you think, oh, they just want my permission. They're telling you, that you need to comply. Like, the person who posted the question earlier, saying that they'll arrest you for obstruction if you don't do what they're saying. Like that doesn't sound like they're asking for consent, but where your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights are concerned, like they're asking for consent. And if consent is given to enter a house, they are not going to just stop with the person that they're looking for. So I've had lots of clients detained over the years who open the door because the agents say, we're looking for so-and-so, and they open the door so that, the agents can come in and see that so-and-so isn't there. But then my client got swept up too, right? Like they started asking about everybody who was present in the house. So that is a very real consequence of opening the door. And then if the agents say that they have a warrant, a better way than like opening the door and asking them to pass it through, because opening the door is kind of an indication of consent. A safer thing that people can do if they're trying to maintain their rights and very clearly signal that they're not giving consent, is to have the agents either pass the warrant under the door or show it through the window. And the warrant's going to have multiple pages usually, so it would be a matter of like looking at a bunch of pages through the window. But, to be able to see, like, is this really the warrant that allows them to enter without consent, or are they actually asking for consent? Okay, so this is how you determine whether a search warrant is valid. So if valid search warrant is going to have the following 5 indications. It's going to be issued by a court. It's going to have the correct name of the person sought and the correct address where they are searching. It's going to have the signature of a judge, and it's going to have an expiration date that is in the future. If it does not contain all of these things, it is not valid. And at that point, you can treat that request to enter as a request for consent. It is not a valid search warrant to enter without the consent of the occupant. Okay, so this is an example of a valid search warrant. It is issued by a court, United States District Court, it says here. The address, of course, has to be correct. The first section contains the information of the person sought, and it says see attachment A. So to make sure that this is valid, then you would have to look at the attachments to this warrant. Attachment B is going to specify exactly what they're allowed to search for. The expiration date here, obviously this one would be not a valid search warrant because it expired in 2011. But assuming usually they're valid for 14 days. So if it is a valid search warrant, it would be an expiration date at some point in the near future. And you can see at the bottom, it is signed by a U.S. magistrate judge. So this is a valid search warrant. Yeah, so the first question is, are clients able to take pictures of the warrant through the window? Absolutely. And then, can an agency which receives federal and state funding prevent us from disseminating the Know Your Rights cards? If not, are there legal provisions saying that we can? That's a good question. And it's something, as a federally funded agency at Neighborhood Legal Services, I am very careful to talk about what people's rights are rather than what they should do. And the ILRC red card just says I'm invoking my rights. So it's like it can't be validly, problematic to tell people what their constitutional rights are. So I think that we limit ourselves to speaking about rights, but it's all, it's all the same thing. Like if people are protecting their rights, they remain more protected. And then, okay, next question. Are ICE agents commonly presenting invalid warrants? Yes, 100%. Here is one. This is what they show 99% of the time. This is it says warrant for arrest of alien. It's issued by the Department of Homeland Security, so not a court. There's no address. There's no expiration date on it. It will have the person's name, but no other information apart from their immigration number. And then you can see the person who signs this is an immigration officer. It's not a judge. And the reason that this warrant is not a valid search warrant is because no neutral party has been involved. Like to get a warrant, like the idea is like our private areas should be so protected from government overreach that you should have to show probable cause to a neutral party in order to violate, our personal space, right? And so in this instance, this warrant has been issued by the same party that is looking for the person, right? So there's no neutral party involved. There's been no showing of probable cause. So that is why this is not valid. The traffic stop question. So someone asked, what if they're stopped during a traffic stop? And, there is valid information, identification information that is allowed to be requested, because when you are driving, you have to have certain information. And then also border checkpoints, I think, are the area where, people have kind of the least rights there, because it all goes back to like, what is your expectation of privacy? And so I think the important point to make here is that in your house or in a private area of your business, you have a giant expectation of privacy. And so the government really needs like a giant amount of probable cause, or, like at least to reach probable cause before they can intrude on that space. When you're out in the world, you still have the right to remain silent. You have the right to refuse a search, but that right lessens, especially in checkpoints. Can client not open the door even though there is a search warrant? If there is a search warrant, then you are required to open the door. But what I can say is that is almost never the case. Yeah, so I've included, someone asked, can I shoot the sample warrants? I've included this training in the materials that I provided to Anna and Laurel, so you will have access to this document. Okay, so moving on, it is incredibly stressful to maintain someone's right to silence, maintain their rights, instead of responding to immigration officials, because they are very insistent. And especially if there's a language barrier, it can be an incredibly stressful situation. So the ILRC red card, I'm sure you all are familiar with this, but it has one part in Spanish, or not, sorry, in the person's native language. I think it's available. I can't remember if it's like 17 or 14 different languages, but many different languages. And then on the other side, it's in English, and it just says, I don't wish to speak with you. I'm not giving up my rights. And so it's something that they can just pass to the immigration officer to invoke their constitutional rights. It used to be that nonprofits could request these and they would just be mailed to you for free. So we requested thousands of these and passed them out. And I think in current times, like they just couldn't keep up with the demand. So that is currently not a service that they offer, but you can pay for them to be printed for you, or they have a printout that you can just like cut, you print yourself and you can cut them and give them to clients. So that is, a way that we can support communities to just help remind them of their rights. And then putting that into practice, I'm going to play this video for you. And this is a real encounter with immigration officials coming to someone's door. So I'm going to play this and then discuss a little bit. Okay.
I do not give you any permission to enter my home based on my Fourth Amendment rights.
That's Jasmine recording from her home in Escondido as she reads her rights to federal immigration agents at her door.
I do not wish to speak with you. Answer your questions or sign your hand. Any documents based on my Fifth Amendment rights under the United States Constitution.
Jasmine says they were looking for her uncle, who wasn't home. She says he is undocumented but has no criminal history. She says she and most of her family in the home are U.S. citizens.
He was like, oh, if you guys don't come out in 5 minutes, we're taking all of you guys.
For her safety, she asked that we not show her face. Jasmine says after a few minutes, the agents went to their car and returned with this paper, an ICE administrative warrant. But she knew they can't come in without a warrant that's signed by a judge.
You have a warrant.
Yeah, warrant's not a problem if you guys don't want to talk.
We don't want to talk.
They thought that we were going to open the door for them, but no, like, you know, we have our rights too. Like, we know what to do.
Okay. So immigration agents come to her door. They're looking for someone, not her. She's a citizen. I don't know if that language sounded familiar that she's using there, but she's reading the ILRC red card to him. And then she knows, he shows that warrant for arrest of alien, and she's like, that's not a valid search warrant. And she calls him on his bluff, and he says, like, we're gonna arrest all of you. He, you know, like immigration doesn't have jurisdiction over citizens, but you know, it doesn't stop him from saying it. And she says, no, I know my rights, and they go away, right? And so it doesn't mean that that is what is going to happen in every encounter. And I can tell you, in searching for this video, you know, I found ones where people were asserting their rights, and that information, you know, like it was completely overridden. But you know, this is a valid approach to take. And I'm wondering if you can put maybe in the chat, what do you think would have happened if she had allowed them to enter? You know, she's a citizen. They're not looking for her. What do you think would have happened? I'll give a moment for you to think. Yeah, someone says violation of her rights. They would have escalated, pushed their way in. It would have destroyed the whole family, taken her and all in the house. Yeah, take them arrested, made up excuses to arrest them, maybe hurt someone. They would have taken her. I think the most likely outcome is that they would have asked everybody in the house, what is their immigration status? And she says, you know, most of the people are citizens, but that means there were some people in that house that weren't citizens. And so she, you know, she protected her family from, you know, some pretty dramatic consequences. So, you know, what she did in that moment was very brave. She protected her rights and she protected her family, and she was just reading that ILRC card. So I think it's important to know that that can be effective. It's not guaranteed to be effective, but it's good information to have in your pocket to share with clients.
I do not give you any permission to.
I didn't mean to. I'm trying to get to the next slide, but I played it again. Okay. And this is important to note, and we've kind of touched on this before, but immigration agents need your consent. They need someone's consent to enter a house or a private part of a business, but they don't need informed consent. And that's why they can use that warrant for arrest of alien as if it were a valid search warrant. Because that's a way to obtain consent, right? Like they say, I have this warrant, you have to let me in. Okay. And then you've given consent, right? So other things that they'll do to get that consent that is not informed consent is to say that they're the police, or that they're investigating an identity theft, or they found someone's ID. They might say, and this is the example that I'm giving based off of lots of experiences, saying they're looking for someone else, but then, you know, coming in and talking to everybody in the house. And then sometimes like wearing different clothing so that you think that they're coming for a different purpose. So there can be a lot of ways that that consent is obtained without actually knowing the full consequences of what's going to happen after the consent is given. So something to keep in mind. And then we've also touched on this, but you know, people may be arrested even when they assert their rights. And I saw a terrible video as I was looking for a positive video of, you know, of protecting rights. And it was one where the guy, he was in his car, he was with his family, and he kept saying, "I don't give consent. I don't give consent. That's not a valid search warrant." And they broke his window and, you know, arrested him, and he already had a removal order, and he was back in Mexico very soon after that. So there's really, you know, tragic things that occur, and sometimes the response to the violation of rights can't be quick enough. So I don't want to pretend that this is a perfect solution or that it perfectly protects anyone. But in general, where a person has a right to legal proceedings, if they are arrested in violation of their rights, there is something that can be done about that later. The case can be dismissed against them if all of the information that has been obtained about their violation of immigration law was obtained through a violation of their rights. And the best way for someone to document that violation of rights is to have videotape of it. You know, like if there is videotape of them saying, "No, I don't give consent," and that you know, refusal of consent being completely overridden by the immigration officials, there is something that lots of people are going to be able to do about that later on in their immigration case. And so it is perfectly legal to record audio and video of federal agents as they're, you know, having this interaction, as long as it doesn't interfere with their work. So obviously you can't be up and blocking them and videotaping, but you can be kind of a, you know, a reserved party, you know, just documenting what's happening, and that is legal. And if they tell you that's illegal, you know, that's not true, that's legal. You could do that. Obviously, everybody wants to protect their safety, and if you feel that you are threatened, that's not a good idea. You know, to keep doing, but you know, to the extent that things are documented, you know, that is going to be much more, like much stronger evidence in the case to get the charges dismissed than just kind of like a he said, she said situation where, you know, the client is saying they didn't give me a chance to, you know, to defend my rights, and them saying, "Yes, we did, you let us in." So obviously, you know, I think we all know, you know, having actual documentation of what happened, it can be invaluable. Okay, and then the question, I've seen in some cases where agents storm into homes where they show up at your door, would it be best to just stay quiet and not answer anything in hopes that they leave? You know, I mean, everybody makes their decision about what they're going to do, but if somebody wants to maintain their right to silence, if they want to, you know, have the argument later that they were, you know, the officers entered and arrested them in violation of their rights, they cannot voluntarily give that information to the officers. So, it, you know, they have to continue to do what they've started to do in that situation if they want to have the argument that, you know, they were arrested in violation of their rights. Okay. And then there's a question, what should children, teenagers do in case an adult is not home? The consent is supposed to come from someone who's over 18. So, you know, a minor can't give that consent. And I think the other questions I might I might answer at the end because they're not regarding this exact issue. Okay, so next slide. I just wanted to give you kind of a rundown of what happens when someone is arrested by immigration. So like, let's say they are, you know, maintaining their rights, or let's say they're not, you know, they just tell the agent like, "No, I'm not here legally," they get arrested. So what happens after that? And that most people are going to have the right to defend themselves in immigration proceedings in front of an immigration judge and apply for any relief that they might be eligible for. But then, as I've mentioned before, there's certain people who don't have that right necessarily. So it's going to be people who already have a deportation order or a removal order. And that would result from previous contact with immigration. So someone who's had absolutely no contact with immigration is not going to have a removal order. But it would come from being detained at the border, entering illegally, or it would happen after having a case in immigration court. And you can receive a removal order in immigration court either if you lose your case, so you apply for something and you lose the case, or if you are you placed into proceedings and you don't appear at the proceeding. So a lot of people, they end up they're detained in Arizona, they get a court date scheduled in Arizona, they come to California, they don't even know, but they were detained. They had the immigration judge was there calling their name back in Arizona, and, they do have a removal order. So it can result from minimal contact, but it does result from contact with immigration. Also, if they've been present for the EU, if they entered without legal status and have been present for less than 2 years, they can be subject to that expanded expedited removal. And then if they sign documents, some people just can't, be detained, like they need to get, back to something. They don't want to be in detention. And so they just sign away, they sign their deportation and they waive their right to a hearing. So all of those folks, in those 3 categories can be deported very quickly. Obviously, the third category is a little different because that person's clearly not trying to fight their case. But in the first 2 cases, if someone falls into those categories and they are afraid to return to their country, they need to state that very clearly to the immigration agent. So it used to be that when agents were deporting someone in these situations, they had to ask, do you have a fear of returning to your country? Now they don't have to ask that. So someone has to state that affirmatively if they want to apply for asylum. So that's something important to note. You have to be very forthcoming and very clear about that request to apply for asylum if you fear being returned to your country. And obviously with all of this, it's so important to talk to an attorney because, whether someone has a removal order can be a very complicated question, what relief they might have, and also like planning their defense, right? Like, so if someone fits into the categories of, having a removal order or being in the present less than 2 years, it's probably better to talk to an attorney sooner rather than later because they could be removed very quickly. And so there might not be time after they're detained. So if there's signatures needed, a case that needs to be prepared, like all of that should happen beforehand, ideally. The problem, of course, is that, the resources needed to take those cases is immense. And most nonprofits don't have capacity to take on any, meaningful number of removal defense cases because the number that every attorney can do is so few. And the community need is so great. So I have included a removal defense attorney list to share with you. And these are just attorneys that, NLS has, we can't recommend everyone, we don't know them, but they're people that we believe are, we have some confidence in that aren't going to scam clients or work with notarios or anything like that. So we have that list that you can provide to people if they're in that situation. Okay, and then, I think you can refer any clients that have questions to get a legal consultation. It is incredibly important that people not do it with notarios or document preparers. At NLS, we see, just the terrible results of how people who don't understand immigration law are putting together cases. So like Hermandad Mexicana is one of the worst offenders in the local area. I just saw a woman yesterday whose residence got denied because they moved offices and they didn't notify immigration, and the documents came to the old address and nobody responded, and now she can't, she's lost her ability to become a resident. And it's just, like the level of like just really tragic things that happen when people who don't really understand immigration law, like they might have really nice intentions, but the effect of practicing immigration law when they don't know what they're doing is just terrible because it's a minefield. And I've been doing this 18 years and like, do I feel completely confident about it? No, like nobody does. It's really, really hard. So, just giant red flag if you hear, that your client is doing their immigration case with their tax preparer or with Hermandad, like, it's not great. It's also illegal, right? Like practicing law without a license is illegal. And so I have an option here from the Los Angeles Public Library to get a consultation. And they do simple, they'll do like naturalization, they'll do work permit renewals, green card renewals. All of the work is for free and all of it is done by local nonprofits. So it's a great place to go. You can use the QR code or you can follow the link and you can actually book a telephonic appointment for your client. So you could just do it with your client in the office or sorry, at the home. But it's a really great way to get them some attention and they can just have a consultation on their case, right? Like maybe they just want to know, do I have a removal order? Or maybe they want to know, is there any, immigration relief I could apply for? They can do a brief consultation and kind of give people that information based on their specific facts of their case. And then I also have the county resources on reporting notario fraud. So if you have a client who's been, scammed by a notario, that is the place that you can go to report it. Okay, and so a brief word on family preparedness planning. We have a guide. I'm sending that to you. We created at NLS, we created our own guide, and ILRC, Immigration Legal Resource Center, has one, and a couple of other orgs do, but I felt like it could be a little bit more intuitive, have a little bit of a better flow. So our guide is intended to sort of, in filling out the guide, it walks people through the preparation of a family plan. We are in the midst of recording English and Spanish videos, walking people through filling out the form, and that will go up on our website, which I'll share with you at the end. So that information is forthcoming. But I think the guide is like fairly self-explanatory, and that will be shared in your materials. But basically, the steps in creating a family plan are, and this is like something that people will want to do if there is a caregiver in the household who could be detained by ICE, is to first pick a trusted person who's going to help coordinate both the legal response and the care of dependents. And it's super important that the person who might be detained memorize that phone number, because if they are detained, their cell phone gets confiscated. So they would not be able to contact that person if they didn't have their phone number memorized. And then it's a matter of making a plan of like who's going to care for dependents, and who's going to pick them up that day. So there's like a short-term plan, and then there's a long-term plan of like, what do you want to have happen if you are, deported or detained long-term? Do you want them sent to you in your country? Do you want them to stay here with a relative? So there's lots of things to think through. And this can be very stressful. So the other thing that we are in the process of getting on our website is both Spanish and English videos that talk about mental health, that talk about coping mechanisms, and also, or coping strategies, and also have some advice about talking to kids about family planning, family preparedness planning, because it's such a stressful issue. And I think it can be one of those things where like it's so stressful, people don't want to talk about it, but ultimately I think having a plan in place is going to make everybody feel, for the most part, more secure than if there isn't one, and just like fearing the unknown all the time. So it can be somewhat empowering, but it's a really sad and hard thing to go through with people. But someone also had asked, do I have any resources for picking that trusted person, picking a, a caregiver? And the answer is I haven't heard of anything like that. And I would say like all of the clients that I've talked to when we go through this have had, like they've wanted it to be someone that they know rather than, a stranger who is stepping in to do this because it's their kids, right? They want their kids to go with their loved ones. So I know that there's going to be like, people that don't have that person, and that I would say that is an area of unmet need to my knowledge. I'm not aware of any resources there, unfortunately. Another thing to think about is, for the people who are going to pick up, who are going to take over the care of, kiddos, is are they authorized with the school or with the daycare provider? Because if they're not and the caregiver is detained, then the kids won't necessarily be released to that person. So a plan has to be made with the, school or daycare before anything happens to make sure that the proper authorizations are in place. And then another thing that the trusted person is going to do is help with the legal defense. So who is that trusted person going to contact to come in and help the person who's been detained? And so, ideally in a perfect world, everybody gets their attorney and they talk to them first, and, everything's all planned out and the documents are in place and, you just file them, but that's not going to happen a lot of the time. So if the person has an attorney, obviously that's going to be the first person to call. If not, Immigrant Defenders has a rapid response hotline. It's not a 24/7, it's like open during business hours, but they can assist with both locating a detainee and with providing referrals for removal defense. And then I'm sharing the removal defense attorney list that we have at NLS. So those are some resources. And then the last thing is obtaining all of the sort of important documents that are going to be needed both to, live life after this person is detained, but also to prepare a legal case. So birth certificates, passports, vaccination records, immigration documents, and making sure that the trusted person has access to them. So they all should be in one place. But like, for instance, passports, really important because if someone's long-term plan is to have their kids sent to them in their country, if they are deported, then the kids need passports to be able to travel. And if they don't have the passports, getting the signature of the parent who's either detained or no longer in the country is going to be much more difficult. So those are things that are, best to do before disaster strikes. I somehow went backwards here. Okay. And I think there were some questions in the chat. Okay, not on this slide. Okay. And then here I have just resources, more information. There are more videos on protecting rights. These are done by, it's like ACLU and some other orgs. This is the one on the left. And they're like cartoons, and they're in, I want to say 14 different languages. And I just found out that they're all like voiced over by celebrities. So I just found out that like Kumail Nanjiani did the Urdu version of it. So it's it's like for people who learn differently, that can be a helpful resource. And also, having those available in so many different languages. I'm putting the BILA network information here for benefits information because there had been some questions about benefits. If there are updates to, public charge, either regulations or the statute, BILA is going to be out there educating about that. So I wanted to post that resource there. It's also a place you can go if you have clients who are having difficulty obtaining benefits. And then our Know Your Rights and Family Preparedness resources are on our NLSLA website on our immigration page. So I have a link to that there. And that's where so we already have videos a lot like this training, but geared directly to the community. So we have one in English and one in Spanish that are posted there. So you can just send those links to clients if you want to have, to give our presentation to them. Or if you think they might learn better from the cartoon, you can use these We Have Rights ones. So that is available to you. And then we are in the process of putting up the family preparedness guide, going through the forms, and also like how to fill out the caregiver affidavit, and then the mental health resources. So that, I would say, like, by in the next couple weeks, that should be, I had thought that would be up on our website by now, but everybody is so busy that it ends up taking more time than you think to get everything going. But we've approved drafts of these presentations, so we just need to record them in English and Spanish at this point. So that is that. And then our services in general, immigration is just a small part of what we do. So we have a housing team, workers' rights, bankruptcy, public benefits, family law, education, and clean slate, which is like record clearing and reentry work. And our immigration team, we are federally funded, so we are limited to serving people who are survivors of domestic violence and other crimes. So the cases that we specialize in are VAWA, U visa, and T visa. And we did a training, or I did a training last December on those issues and kind of an immigration overview. So I refer you back to that. I think you have access to those resources if you have questions, sort of general immigration questions. And I have our intake information down at the bottom here. So I am super interested. I would love to do the poll again and see what that looks like. Can you open that up, please?
Sure can. All right. Can everybody see it? Great. Thank you guys so much for participating. We'll leave it up here for about 20 more seconds if anybody else wants to participate. All right, thank you guys. I'm going to end the poll. Let's check out these results.
Okay. So lots of people not opening the door. Not much opening the door. Yeah. Shouting through the door. I think there's more of that. Less telling clients to cooperate, more telling clients they have the right to remain silent. Asking if they have a warrant, and yeah, a lot more folks using a cell phone to start. And we still have the one person at the end of the table, which is totally legit. I understand that sentiment. I was just responding to a question. Okay, so I am happy to answer more questions. I see there's one about like the specifics of immigration case. I think, you know, like for specific legal advice, I would definitely recommend a consultation with LAPL, or, you know, with a private attorney, or, you know, if it's possible that they qualify, they could do, you know, with a direct agency as well, you know, Caresen, Chirla. There's a bunch of orgs that do just general consultations, but that's probably the best place to analyze a case like that. Are there other questions that you have, either about the material we covered or anything else?
I did capture a couple questions that came through in the chat. We'll try to get through all those, and I'm really sorry if I missed any of them. So someone asked, how would I prove that I'm a US citizen with only a California ID? When I go to home visits, I don't carry my birth certificate or my US passport with me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like the way that, you know, your rights work, like you should be able to refuse those questions. And, you know, you could also just say, I'm a citizen. You can show your identification. You know, I mean, will it work? You know, we hear that I mean, like, okay, first I'm gonna say, like, 90%, 95% of the time it does work, right? Like, we only hear about the horror stories where citizens end up getting detained. So I think the chances of that are not great, but obviously, like, we can't say that it doesn't happen either. And I think right now we have a situation where immigration agents are under a lot of pressure to get numbers, right? And so I think there's probably a focus on numbers over sort of like actual quality of arrestees, like, you know, like actually being people who do. But, you know, like, there's a lawsuit there if you are, you know, maintaining your rights, or you are a citizen and they, you know, they detain you anyway. So, you know, I mean, does the system work perfectly? No, but it doesn't mean that, you know, it's not worth it to protect your rights where you can.
Thank you for that. Another question that came through is, I've seen videos where I'm assuming ICE agents storm inside homes. Would the better option be to remain silent if they are at your door?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think I can speak to the better option, but I can say, like, that is within your rights. And if you do remain silent and you do document that you are refusing entry, then, you know, there is a better case, you know, to be used in defense of whoever is swept up in that arrest, you know, at a later date. So that would be, you know, a reason that you might want to do that.
Thank you. And then the last question that I captured in the chat was, if the family does not speak English and they state their rights in Spanish, when they're having like an interaction with an ICE agent, would that be probable cause for the officer to enter?
No, they can't. So probable cause cannot be based on the language spoken. So that would not be probable cause to enter.
Okay, and I did see one more question came through the Q&A. Georgina asked, what if someone was caught at the border before the new administration were supposed to check in, but never did out of fear?
Yeah, so in that case, most of those people are placed into removal proceedings, but sometimes they're not. Like, sometimes just, you know, like the document that sort of initiates proceedings, it's called a notice to appear, gets issued, but then never filed with the court. And I've got clients who were detained like 10 years ago and the case was never filed with the court. So, you know, sometimes those records get lost, but the way that you can figure it out is if you go on to, to get to the, it's called EOIR, which is the immigration court system. But I just type into like my search bar EOIR case status, and I enter their immigration number, their A number. So it's going to be a 9-digit number that starts with the letter A. And you just put it in there and it will say like either this record is not found, or it says when their next hearing is, or it says, you know, when they were ordered removed. So that's a really easy way. If you have, you know, that original charging document that has their A number, you can figure out what happened in their case. So also, if you can't figure it out, and regardless, like, great case to do a consultation with an attorney or a nonprofit. I don't understand this question. It says, what was the organization that you said has had incomplete immigration case reports? I heard something, hermanas. Oh, the notario agency was Hermandad Mexicana. And there are lots of offices. They're all over Southern California, probably even further than that. And I think there's like one in Ventura that is OLAP accredited. So they actually do have an attorney who's supervising their casework and they're doing it right. And what I've seen is like all of the offices in LA like use the address and pretend that they're like the address, the one in Ventura. But they're not, and the accreditation has to be like office by office, but they don't even understand that, right? Like they're not even like doing the basic accreditation stuff. So like, they're not going to do the immigration stuff, right? So that, yeah, and they're just very prolific. There are a lot of them. So I mention them only because it comes up so often. And then other organizations in Orange County, Public Law Center is the one that I think does the most immigration. I'm trying to think. If I think of others, I'll put them in the chat. Okay, if a person was accepted for their visa before Trump, can they revoke it? I have a client that has yet to receive their visa, even though they were approved months ago. I mean, this is very dependent on like type of visa. But like they were trying to cancel student visas. So yes, they are trying to revoke visas. If it was like a U visa, chances are that's probably just like their own disorganization within USCIS. So kind of it's a little bit case specific, but I would say like, again, like great thing for a consult if, if they don't have an attorney. I think Eduardo's question is not for me.
Yes, Eduardo, you can get in contact with us at LA Best Babies Network, and we can get you on the mailing list for these trainings for sure. I'll put my email address in the chat for anyone who's interested in that.
Oh, I think there was some chat about keeping, a actual physical copy of documents versus a color copy versus a picture on your phone. I think the worry about just keeping it on your phone is that you don't necessarily have access to your phone. So as soon as, your phone gets taken away, then you don't have that. So that's been the reason that, physical copies are recommended. I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to know, like, because technically you are supposed to have your original work permit and your original green card on you. And so, the technical answer is like, carry that. But, as an attorney who has clients who lose those documents because they have them on them and their purse gets stolen or they leave it on the bus or whatever happens, like, it takes a year to replace that. It's a lot. So, like everybody has to just make their own decision of like, how do you want to treat these documents? But there is a very long lag time in replacing them if they need to be replaced. And it's good to, I mean, like you definitely want to have the copy regardless, because if it, the original does get lost, like you want to have evidence that there is a document that used to exist. So. Yeah, so this question, can a cell phone be searched at the border for entry? We're seeing a lot of that. And in fact, there was a story about an immigration attorney who was representing one of the students who had lost their visas for, First Amendment issues. That attorney was screened and his cell phone was searched at the border. And so yes, that it is very, very possible. Anything else?
I believe you have already answered all the other questions that came through the chat. Any final questions for the Q&A? Anyone? You covered a lot of really great material here, though. And we will be sharing all these materials out, and all of our webinars are posted on the homevisitingla.org website, which I just dropped in the chat as well.
Thank you, everybody. Can I just type an answer to this question? Or should I
The new one that
answer?
just
Do we
came
have time?
through?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, go, please answer. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So you're welcome to stay if you want to. Also, whatever. It's Friday, as someone said at the beginning. But yeah. So what the administration wants to do is create a much larger denaturalization unit in immigration. And so the idea is to go back through approved immigration, like naturalization applications, and just search for ones where there was some fraud involved. Because basically, once you're a citizen, the only thing that can happen to make you not a citizen is if there's fraud that is uncovered in the underlying application. And so the idea with the denaturalization unit is that they're going back through and they're just trying to find fraud wherever they can, which seems like, whatever. It's a very specific decision about use of resources, right? They're just, it's like you're going to look through so many cases and you're going to find so little of this, but that's what, that's what they're doing. So that is the way that, denaturalization is being engaged. The other thing, of course, is just lack of due process, right? Because if Kilmer Abrego can be detained and sent to El Salvador with no legal process, all of us can, if there's not due process for one person, because it's it is that judicial process that is the point of establishing whether you have any defenses, right? Or, were your rights violated or anything like that. If you don't get that legal process, then, so it would be that process that would prevent a citizen from being deported. And so if that isn't happening, then, then nobody has that right to defend themselves. So that is the concerning part. What a terrible note to end.
No, you did great. This was really wonderful. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You're getting lots of love in the chat, and everyone says excellent information. It was just an honor to partner with y'all again to do a follow-up training on this, because so much is changing.
Yeah,
we want to prepare our staff the best we can. So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.